A key element of nearly every tyrant's playbook is finding a good scapegoat. Hitler had the Jews, Idi Amin had the Indians, Stalin had, well, pretty much everybody but Stalin. But anyway, today's left has hit upon an entirely new kind of scapegoat. Someone who can be blamed for all the world's ills with no guilt whatsoever. A scapegoat who won't fight back and who is becoming increasingly complicit in its own destruction. That scapegoat is us. When you're a dictator and looking for a good scapegoat, you have always, until now, looked for someone outside your primary culture. You looked at a relatively small sector of society, frequently immigrants, frequently successful immigrants, and used resentment against their success to build hatred and a cause to rally around. Or an overwhelmingly powerful external enemy, that will do as well. Again, leftists, A for originality. As I recall, Osama bin Laden didn't spend a lot of time railing against the evils of the Quran or tearing down statues of Muhammad, which is interesting because, as I understand it, most Muslims are not on board with the whole statue of Muhammad thing. He did this because, as unhinged and evil as he was trying to build a movement that would succeed, not fail. That is precisely the opposite of what leftists in the United States are trying to do to their own country today. They're trying to tear down the very social system that purposely, not accidentally, but purposely, put them in a position to be able to do just that. Irony doesn't seem to quite cover it. Again, new approach. Generally, people looking to overthrow a tyrant are put in a position to do so because the personal liberty in the country has become so constrained that people just can't take it anymore. And they rebel. What American leftists are saying is, in essence, we have way too much freedom, and we need to put someone in power who's going to take it away. Sounds ridiculous when you put it that way, but think about it. That's exactly what they are doing. You'll notice that not many of those advocating for this kind of revolution have ever actually lived through a real one. If they had, they would almost certainly have a different perspective. Now, like all good tyrants, leftists use the term we in a strictly theoretical sense. They reserve the right to do whatever the heck they want. By we, they mean you. When they talk about themselves, and when they live their lives, actually, the goal is to appear to be completely on board with the revolution while living in a world of their own, where the only important rules are the ones that are convenient for them. This attitude and the entire self-loathing philosophy that's now being deployed was sort of shielded from reality while Trump was in office. His mean tweets and generally crude behavior made a very easy target. And while he was in the way, none of this craziness was really on full display. That all changed when our new bumbler-in-chief was installed in the White House. They now have a clear field, and they have the ball, and they are running with it. And they are targeting the most vulnerable with as much negative energy as they can muster. To give us some perspective on how we've gotten to where we are, I'd like to reflect briefly on what we might call the leftist hierarchy of hate. This gives us some perspectives on why it is so important to keep upping the ante, because if you don't, well, you run out of people to hate, and we can't have that. Enemy number one has got to be, and has been for some time, rich white men. And I have to say, much like Mr. Trump, they make a very tempting target. It's a difficult time in the life of the average person when they realize they will never be a Rockefeller. And some envy is understandable. Still, it's important, as always, to remember the words of a former non-idiot and avoid the bitter politics of envy. Free markets rule, and I mean that in a very literal and statistical sense. Number two on the hit parade, all white men. Some history there. Ancient history, to be sure, but an overall perception and assumption of superiority, which has, and this is very important to understand, been effectively wiped away for many decades, to the point that the only institutional behaviors still allowed discriminate against this group and not for it. Running out of cannon fodder, better go for group number three, all men. We've now moved even further past our current reality, going on a century now, past the point when the great majority of people alive today have any real memory. So it's now, more important than ever, necessary to blame, ridicule, and punish a group of people for something their distant ancestors may have done at a time when to do anything else would likely have resulted in misfortune or death to their loved ones. Listen to Jordan Peterson. Is it any wonder that record numbers of young men are struggling or failing outright? Any wonder that more and more of them are never making it to college, which we've been led to believe by the elite left is the secret to personal salvation? Well, I expect we will soon see a massive move by the left to boost male participation in college, right? Right? Well, still not enough hatred for our taste, so let's open the hatred umbrella even further and include all people. It is now necessary, my fellow Americans, to hate ourselves. Every single one of us, literally, at the cellular level. If you were born a woman and you believe that to be a woman, you must be able to bear children, you are a bigot and probably a racist, and someone who needs to get on board with American unity or suffer the consequences. Same if you don't worship vulgarity. And oh, heaven forbid, if you don't believe we should be showing our children images of women being treated as objects, because that is truly uplifting for women. And just to put some icing on the hatred cake, folks, let's teach our children to hate themselves. Let's teach them that it's okay to hate themselves because, well, they deserve it. And because, you see, the only way to experience true love is through hatred. Had enough? I know I have. Let me just leave you with one brief personal anecdote from one of our kids whose class, before schools closed in 2020, was told by their teacher that it was their fault that COVID was spreading because they were not being diligent enough in wearing their masks. Well, being the stickler for accurate information, I verified this information through other parents before repeating it to you here. That's what we're dealing with. It should be an interesting few years. Now that their agenda is on full, unapologetic display, it'll be interesting to see how it's received by the average American. Now, personally, I'm hopeful, though admittedly not as hopeful as I was maybe a year ago, which I'm sure you never would have guessed. But on the other hand, we humans tend to, wrongly, project current trends out into the indefinite future, which in this case would truly be a blessing. Now, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank most of you for being American, and thank you for being human.